Control players denied.
Hey Control Nation, welcome back to the channel. I'm your host, Dr. Red. In this video, we are reviewing all of the special condition cards: Asleep, Burn, Confusion, Paralysis, and Poison. Use the chapters to find what you like, and I will also be adding some commentary on deck lists and ideas you might try. Please add your own in the comments. Also, I want to thank the channel members, the Arborists. Thank you for your support and in making CPU what it is. And thank you to all of the members of the Discord who keep the conversation going. And without further ado, let's get started. First, we have Sleep Pokemon. First is Bellossom. You might consider pairing this with Vileplume, which also evolves from Gloom, the one that allows you to, when evolving, to attach as many energies as you find off the top of your deck, up to 8 cards. This will help the powerful dance attack, 90 for each. Flip a coin for each energy attached to this Pokemon. It does 90 for each heads. Next, we have Foongus, which puts to sleep, obviously, but then its evolution, Amoonguss EX, also has Spore Ball, which puts your opponent's Pokemon to sleep. Champignon's Swing does 100 plus 80 more damage on a coin flip if heads. You have Paras, which puts to sleep. You have the new Parasect, which puts to sleep. You have Shiinotic with the ability Calming Light. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon's in the active, you may make your opponent's active Pokemon asleep. But notice, ladies and gentlemen, that it has a 2-star retreat cost, a 2 energy retreat cost. So you're going to pair it with the new Toedscool. It's a fighting type. It has an ability that makes all of your Pokemon, your active Pokemon at least, have a -2 retreat cost. So you'll go into the active with Shiinotic, put your opponent's Pokemon to sleep, and then you're going to retreat into Jynx EX for 1 water, 2 colorless energy. If your opponent's Pokemon is asleep, you can automatically KO it. Highly recommend you put an enhanced hammer or 2 into your decks so you can get rid of the pesky mist energy. Toedscool puts to sleep. Satotl puts to sleep. There's the Jynx EX that we just commented on, Heart-Stopping Kiss. There's Luvdisc. Water Pulse puts to sleep. It also has matching. Search your deck for up to 2 support cards, reveal them, put them into your hand. This is actually really, really good if you don't mind feeding a Luvdisc to your opponent. You get 2 supporter cards, gives you some options. Hopefully your opponent doesn't get rid of your hand, but that's a chance you have to take. We have Milotic. Hypno Splash puts to sleep. Lifeboat. Once during your turn, when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon, you can use this ability. Each player puts a basic from their discard onto their bench. This is the replacement for Mantine, which just rotated. There's Milotic EX. It is used in the Wall Stall archetype to stop Terramons with its Sparkling Scales ability. Effects of attacks and damage from Terra Pokemon are null and void. Hypno Splash for 1 water, 2 colorless energy does 160 base damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep. This is great for stalling against anything with Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon EX, as its Demolish attack will cut through Sparkling Scales. Otherwise, Milotic EX is a complete wall against Dragapult and Charizard, among others. Pon-4, Water Pulse puts to sleep. Poliwhirl, Hypnosis puts to sleep. Poliwrath, Hypnosis puts to sleep. Slowpoke, Rest puts itself asleep. We're putting it here for the sake of completion. Slowbro, Big Yawn, both Pokemon are asleep. Snom, Powder Snow puts to sleep. Spheal, Powder Snow puts to sleep. This is the basic Pokemon for the Walrein archetype, which has an attack stating that your opponent's Pokemon cannot attack if 2 energy or fewer are attached. Chimecho has Sleep Inducer for 2 colorless energy. The active Pokemon is now asleep after you switch it into the active spot from your opponent's bench. This is a fantastic gusting card to get something pesky in there that you may want to retreat lock. Drowzee, forced sleep. Your opponent chooses one of their bench Pokemon, switches it with their active. The new active is now asleep. If it's a supporter mon, that's good for you because you might be able to stall. And if it's an active Pokemon, it's also good for you because maybe it doesn't wake up. I mean, an attacker Pokemon. Here for Hypnosis, when you play this Pokemon from your hand to evolve one of your Pokemon during your turn, you may make your opponent's active Pokemon asleep. This is the original supporter mon for the Jynx EX that we just talked about. Exeggcute Hypnosis puts to sleep. Exeggutor Hypnoblast puts to sleep. Jigglypuff Sing puts to sleep. Misdreavus Hypnoblast puts to sleep. Darkrai Dark Slumber puts to sleep. Haunter Dark Slumber puts to sleep. Gengar Nightmare puts to sleep, does 100 base damage for a darkness and a colorless energy. The ability Nightgate, once during your turn you may switch your active Pokemon from your bench Pokemon. This is great if you can fit it into a box deck with a darkness energy. That way it makes retreat locking for your opponent impossible. Malamar Hypnotic Ray puts to sleep, also Psychic Insight ability. Once during your turn, look at the top card of your opponent's deck. If you do, look at the top card of your deck. This is to help you know how to plan for the next turn. Sableye, Night Eyes, your opponent's active Pokemon's now asleep. Unseen Claw, 20 plus 70 more damage if your opponent's active is affected by a special condition. If you pair this with Brute Bonnet and put Binding Mochi on Sableye, you're going to be doing 130 damage. This is great if you can especially hit for weakness. I can also see this being paired with Baby Glimmora and Glimmora EX. Altaria has Soothing Lullaby for 1 water, 1 metal energy, 110 base damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep. During Pokemon checkup, your opponent flips 2 coins instead of 1 if either materials this Pokemon is still asleep. It can be an archetype on its own. I highly recommend you put this into Slowking if you ever want to try slowing your opponent down, no pun intended. Or if you want a control build for that archetype. Hoothoot has Insomnia. This Pokemon can't be asleep. It's popular more and more as a one-of in any deck running Fan Rotom. Indeedee Hypnoblast puts your opponent's Pokemon to sleep. Komala Slumbering Smack. Both Pokemon are asleep. During your next turn attack, use ice Pokemon do 100 more damage. You have to hope that your opponent stays asleep and you wake up. Slackoth. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now asleep. Slacking. Slacker's Headstrike. This Pokemon is now asleep. And we're back to the beginning. Let's move on to Burn. Capsicid, Slightly Spicy. Your opponent's active Pokemon is burned. Scoville and Hotbite, your opponent's Pokemon is burned. There's Scoville and EX. Chilly Snapper Bind, your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. During your opponent's next turn, this Pokemon can't retreat. Highly recommend pairing this with what we'll see here in a second, the new Volcanion EX and the new Magmortar. Cradily, Selective Slime ability. Once during your turn, you may flip a coin. If heads, choose Burn, Confusion, or Poison. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now affected by that condition. Pair it with Volcanion EX, then just retreat it out. Miasma Wind does 100 damage for each special condition affecting your opponent's active. Armor Rouge has Flame Cannon. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. The other Armor Rouge, Scorching Armor ability. If this Pokemon's in the active and is damaged by an attack, the attacking Pokemon is now burned. Castform, Sunny Form, Singe Burns. Centiskorch, Singe Burns. Fuecoco, Heat Burn. Your opponent's active Pokemon is burned. Fuecoco, same thing. Your opponent's active Pokemon is burned with Super Singe. Incineroar EX, Blaze Blast. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. This is good in Tatsugiri EX box. Magmar, Searing Flame. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. There it is. There's the Magmortar. The ability Magma Surge. During Pokemon checkup, put 3 more damage counters on your opponent's burned Pokemon. So if you use Chilly Snapper Bind, it'll be 2 plus 3, so 5 damage counters. And Searing Flame also, flip a coin if heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. Magma Surge also stacks. So if you get 4 of these on the bench, that's 12 damage counters for being burned. Nummel, Hot Magma burns. Nummel, Singe burns. Camerupt, Super Singe burns. Ponseer, Searing Flame burns. Pyroar, Singe burns. Rapidash, Singe burns. Phlegma, Hot Magma burns. Macargo, this is interesting. Lava Zone. Whenever your opponent's active Pokemon moves to the bench during their turn, their new active Pokemon is now burned. So you could put this on the bench for Magmortar and for Scoville and EX. There's Macargo EX, Hot Magma. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. Turtonator, Ring of Fire. Your opponent's active Pokemon is burned, and that Pokemon, during your opponent's next turn, that Pokemon can't retreat. If you have something pretty hefty like a Pidgeot EX, you could pair this with Magmortar to really get it KO'd after 2 turns, or 1 if your opponent flips tails. Ring of Fire is a bit tricky to get energized. 1 fire, 2 colorless. Crispin would help you here, as would Counter Gain. There's the Volcanion EX we mentioned, Scalding Steam ability. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon is in the active, you may make your opponent's active Pokemon burn, so you don't even have to get a stage 2 with Magmortar out if you don't want to. You can get rid of this in the active via Penny or Latios EX. This is really popular in a big basic deck that will utilize Brute Bonnet with the Ancient Boost Energy Capture to poison, and also with Baby Petron to increase that poison, so burn just adds 2 more damage. Vulpix, Super Singe burns. Ninetales, Eerie Glow will burn and confuse your opponent. Ninetales EX, Heatwave burns. Mirrored Flames does 80 plus 140 more if you have the same number of cards in your hand as your opponent. This is also true for the new Noivern, which will have a free attack for 110, and it also confuses. The easiest way to do this is with Judge. Dox1, this is here for completion. Well-Baked Body states this Pokemon can't be burned, and you prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's fire Pokemon. So if there's a fire archetype like what we just said that gets really popular, Dox1 is one way out of it. There's Cloth, Boiled Press. This Pokemon is now burned. And Untinged Scissors. We all know it's 30 plus 160 more if it's affected by a special condition. A bit hard to get, a bit awkward. DTE's not in the format anymore, but still is what it is. Arbok, Panic Poison. Interesting. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned, confused, and poisoned. So imagine it stays in the active, and you have Cradily in the next on your next turn. That's going to be 300 damage. Heatran, Incandescent Body. If it's in the active and is damaged by an attack, the opposing Pokemon is now burned. This is popular with Metang to get Steel Burst going on. Dangerous Laser. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned and confused. This is fantastic for item retrieval decks like Magneton. All you have to do is burn and confuse your opponent's Pokemon. If they don't get it out of the active, or if they attack, they flip tails. And then on your same turn when you're attacking, you can just get Dangerous Laser back into your hand. And we're back to the beginning. Next we have Confusion. Exeggutor, Poisonous Ploy, 1 Grass, 1 Colorless Energy, 70 base damage. Your opponent's active is now confused and poisoned. Switch this Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. This is great for the new Tyranitar with the Daunting Gaze ability, I think it's called, wherein you can item lock your opponent when Tyranitar is in the active. Exeggutor can also be great for damage prevention with Mimikyu or Cornerstone Mask Ogre Pawn EX if you want to try to have an aggro control kind of build with the 70 plus poison damage. Or you could also put Baby Petulant into the active to increase the poison damage after the 70. Cradily, which we just talked about, you can get poison your opponent. Orbital, Brain Shake, your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Venomoth, we all know this one. Perplexing Powder for 1 Grass Energy does 30 base damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused, and they cannot play any item cards. This is fantastic with Froslass Spread Control. Venusaur EX, Dangerous Toxip. Your opponent's active is now confused and poisoned. Tranquil Flower also heals 60 from any Pokemon when it's in the active. This is great as a standalone archetype. You'll need Crispin to get it charged up, or Tealmask Ogre Pawn with Energy Switch. Vulpix, Confuse Ray confuses. Ninetales, Eerie Glow, you're burned and confused. Tentacruel, Poisonous Whip, your opponent's active Pokemon is poisoned. Tentacular Panic, flip a coin until you get Tails. This attack does 90 damage for each head. If the first flip is Tails as well, your opponent's active Pokemon is confused. Really interesting attack, great with Reversal Energy. Lantern, Disorienting Flash. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused, but you put 8 damage counters instead of 3 on that Pokemon if your opponent attacks and flips Tails. Magnezone, Mighty Magnetism. Your opponent's active Pokemon is confused and they are retreat locked. Alakazam has Strange Hacking. Your opponent's active Pokemon is confused. You can move any number of damage counters from your opponent's Pokemon to their other Pokemon in any way you like. This is great if you have a highly damaged Charizard EX or Dragapult EX or something, and there's a bunch of baby Pokemon, smaller Pokemon on the bench you just want to get rid of right away. This is run with the Alakazam EX archetype. Aromatisse, Perfume Press. Your opponent's active is now confused. Claydol, Mind Bend. Your opponent's active Pokemon is confused. Look at also Kaboom Doll. Put damage counters on your opponent's active until its remaining HP is 10. If you did this, this attack does 120 damage to this Pokemon. Now, if you put a Luxurious Cape on this Pokemon, it'll increase its HP to 220. So you can use this attack twice. If you want to keep Claydol in the active, you do that. But also, if you don't, whether you want it to be there or not, you can immediately use Trevenant with I forget the ability's name. It allows you to add a damage counter at the end of your turn when you're in the active. Or you could just use Brute Bonnet with Ancient Booster Energy Capsule in order to just poison your opponent's active Pokemon. This, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know if it'll be meta or not, but when Mega Pokemon come out, all of those 300 plus HP Pokemon will be gone in one turn for one prize with Claydol and Brute Bonnet. Darkspawn EX, Wondershine. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Not a bad attack for 130, 2 close energy, considering time to chow down. It says when you place Pokemon from your hand to evolve, you may heal all damage from each of your evolution Pokemon, but then you discard all energy from those Pokemon. This is the Pokemon version of an old supporter named Cheryl, which did the exact same thing. This has seen no play, however. Farigiraf, Eerie Wave. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Florge, or is it Florges? I'm not sure. Ability, Captivating Invitation. Once during your turn, flip a coin. If heads, switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active spot, and the new active Pokemon is now confused. Gothita, Eerie Wave. Your opponent's active is now confused. Gothorita, Mind Bend, same thing, Confusion. Mimikyu EX. Ghostly Trip, your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Mr. Mime, Eerie Wave, your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Interesting attack with Lookalike Show, 1 colorless energy. Your opponent reveals their hand, use the effect of a support card you find there as the effect of this attack. Monkey Dory has Mind Bend, we all know what this thing does. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Oricorio, Dazzle Dance, your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Rapska with Revival Blessing, for 1 colorless energy, put a Pokemon from your discard pile onto your bench. That includes, ladies and gentlemen, stage 2s. So imagine if you have a Brilliant Blender, or if you just have an Ultra Ball to just get rid of a Pidgeot EX, just immediately put the Pidgeot EX onto the bench and skipping evolution entirely. Ray Uniqueless, Summoning Gate for 1 colorless energy. Look at the top 8 cards of your deck. You may put any number of Pokemon you find there onto your bench, shuffle the other cards back into your deck. But Brain Shake for 100 base damage for a colorless and a Psychic Energy. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. This is a fun little meme deck. Shout out to Gumball Comics. He is the Ray Uniqueless user in the Discord. We have Slowking EX with Profound Knowledge. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused. Wise Headbutt lets you search for any 2 cards in your deck, put them into your hand. Slurpuff, Slurp, flip 2 coins. This attack does 9 damage for each heads. If both are tails, however, your opponent's active is now confused. Interesting. Zubat, Attraction Wave. Your opponent's active Pokemon is confused. You put 6 damage counters instead of 3 if they attack and flip tails. Sylveon's Mystical Return, wherein you can shuffle on a coin flip one of your opponent's Pokemon and all attached cards in their deck, but Disarming Voice will confuse it's good for a reversal energy. You have Umbreon EX with Moon Mirage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now confused, does 160 base damage for 2 colorless and 1 darkness energy. You really do need, however, Power Glass with this archetype if you want to use it because of Onyx. 1 darkness, 1 psychic, 1 lightning energy. Discard all energy from this Pokemon and take a prize card. So imagine wearing your opponent down, you get this thing charged up, and you just win. You can also retreat lock something if you can. If you want to go that route. Tapu Lele, Perplex, confuses. Bonsly, Blubbering, free attack. Your opponent's Pokemon is now confused, also the free retreat. Conkeldurr, Gutsy's Tantrum confuses this Pokemon, where it's here for the sake of completion. Gutsy Swing, if this Pokemon is affected by a special condition, ignore all energy in this attack's cost. This card is used in Slowking. It's also its own archetype. Claw, Adrenaline Hammer, this Pokemon is now confused. Primeape, Rant and Rave, this Pokemon is now confused. Annihilate, Tantrum, this Pokemon is now confused, but interestingly enough, Destined Fight is used also in Slowking. Both active Pokemon are knocked out. Ekans, Poison Blend, flip a coin of heads. Your opponent's active Pokemon is confused and poisoned. There's Arbok again, Burn, Confusion, and Poison automatically. Coughing, Suspicious Gas, your opponent's active is confused. Wheezing, Pervasive Gas, your opponent's active is confused. Pangoro, pull in, switch in one of your opponent's bench Pokemon to the active. Tantrum, this Pokemon is now confused. Zubat, flip a coin of heads, your opponent's active is confused. Ends Clang, your opponent's active is now confused. Delcatty, Tail Trickery, your opponent's active is now confused. Lechonk, Disarming Voice, your opponent's active is confused. Oinkologne, Confounding Clone, your opponent's active is confused. The other Oinkologne has Perfume Press, 70 base damage, 3 colorless energy. Your opponent's active is now confused. But this card is also good for Finest Selection. Flip 3 coins, put a number of cards up to the number of heads from your discard pile into your hand. This is the replacement for Baby Ursaluna in rotation. So that's anything from special energy to supporters to item cards. Anything you like, Finest Selection gets it right back in. There's Noivern, Frightening Howl, your opponent's active is now confused. This is what we meant when we were talking about Ninetales EX, Tuning Echo. The same number of cards in your hand, Frightening Howl is a free attack. Spinda, Teetering Steps, this Pokemon is now confused, but the Tangled Feet ability state that if it's confused and is damaged by an attack, flip a coin of heads to prevent that damage. Swablu, Disarming Voice confuses, and then we are back to the beginning. No, we're not, sorry. We're back to Dangerous Laser. Your opponent's active is Burning Confused. This uses Appeal to the Gust card. Switch in your opponent's benched basic to the active spot. If you do, the active is now confused. This is good for a Blood Moon or Ursaluna that maybe can't attack, or if it wants to attack, it's good to try stalling it. Then we're back. Now we're back to the beginning. Okay. Now we have Paralysis, the hardest of the 5 special conditions to induce, if only because much of it is on a coin flip. Dangerous Spores on Amoonguss. Flip a coin of heads. Your opponent's active is paralyzed and poisoned. Beedrill, Nadir Needle. In case you're wondering, ladies and gentlemen, Nadir is like an anti-mystical experience. If something is Nadir, it's like an experience of despair. Nadir Needle is 2 colorless energy, 30 plus 120 more damage. If you have no cards in your hand, will this attack go off for the paralysis and poison coming from it. It's its own archetype. It's kind of tricky to use, but it's doable if you have Squelbit, and then you can just play something right from your hand, like say a Nest Ball. Butterfree, Scale Hurricane, flip 4 coins, 60 damage for each head, and if at least 2 of them are heads, your opponent's active is now paralyzed. Heracross, Body Slam, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Throne-Sleth, flip a coin. If heads, paralysis. Spidops, String Trust, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Litten, Fake Out, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Azumarill, flip a coin. If heads, paralyzed. Blackcurum EX, this is used in Pidgeot control to stop Raging Bolt EX and Dragapult EX. Ice Age for 3 colors energy and 90 base damage. States if your opponent's active is a Dragon Pokemon, it is now paralyzed. With DTE rotating, this probably loses all play, if only because of the awkward energy cost. Cryogonal, first freeze. If you go second and it's your first turn, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Really, really annoying to face. Sees no play though. The other Cryogonal, Ice Beam, flip a coin. Of heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Frogadier, this is in Greninja EX builds. Flip a coin. Of heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Lapras, Freeze Dry, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Poliwag, Bubble, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Poliwrath, Bubble Beam, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Seadra, Bubble Beam, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Squirtle with the Galaxy Foil outline. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Weavile, this is interesting. Hail Claw for 2 water energy and does 70 base damage. Discard all energy from this Pokemon. Your opponent's active is now paralyzed. You want to play this with Power Glass and possibly energy retrieval or any kind of energy retrieval system. Very hard to break that lock. Electric, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Electros, Suction Shock is interesting. For 1 lightning energy, switch in one of your opponent's benched Pokemon to the active. If you do, this attack does 60 damage to the new active Pokemon. Flip a coin. If heads, that Pokemon is now paralyzed. You could pair this with Raichu that does 50 damage to every Pokemon on the board that has any damage counters on it. You could also use Monkey Dory to get rid of your own damage counter so you don't get zapped by it. Flaffy, Thundershock, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Baby Iron Hands, Volt Wave, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Ends Joltik, zapping short, 30 base damage, 2 colorless energy. Before doing damage, discard all Pokemon tools from your opponent's active, and if you discard a tool in this way, your opponent's active is now paralyzed. That's really good for getting rid of things like Hero's Cape. Oricorio, Volt Wave, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Pachirisu, here for the sake of completion. Electricity Pouches, this Pokemon cannot be paralyzed. Everyone discharge for 1 colorless, 1 lightning energy. 10 plus 20 more for each of your bench lightning Pokemon. This is fantastic with Miraidon EX and at Area 0 Underdepths for getting 8 Pokemon on your bench. Palmy, Jolt, flip a coin. Of heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Palmo, flip a coin. Of heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Pincursion, Stun Needle, flip a coin. Of heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Rodon, Thundershock, flip a coin. Of heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is paralyzed. Stunfisk, interesting attack. Paralyzing Crackle for 1 lightning, 1 colorless energy, does 50 base damage. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed, and you get to discard an energy from that Pokemon. Imagine attaching a handheld fan, so if your opponent gets an attack off, you can just push it back. Hopefully you survive, and then you just make it paralyzed and get rid of the other energy. Tadball, Thunder Wave, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Bellibolt EX, not Iono's Bellibolt. Paralyzing Ball, you may discard 2 lightning energy from this Pokemon to make your opponent's active Pokemon paralyzed. If you're going to play this, highly recommend playing Power Glass. Baby Bellibolt, Thundershock, flip a coin. Of heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is paralyzed. Other Bellibolt with the Galaxy Foil outline. Thunder Wave, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. This interesting one is Tapu Koko EX, Vengeful Shock, 1 lightning, 1 colorless energy, 30 plus 90 more damage, and your opponent's active Pokemon is paralyzed, except you can only use it if your Pokemon were knocked out by damage from an attack during your opponent's last turn. Popular with Miraidon EX decks. Togedemaru, an interesting one. 1 lightning energy, Electrifying Chance, 30 base damage. If you have exactly 1 prize card remaining, your opponent's active is now paralyzed. This is a card you might use if you're going to play the Dusk Noir Badoo archetype, wherein you just use Dusk Noir to snipe everything, get yourself down to 1 prize card, and then just stall Togedemaru until you either win with Togedemaru or can switch in a powerful attacker like, say, Blood Moon or Ursaluna EX. Toxtricity, Leer, flip a coin. Of heads, your opponent's active is now paralyzed. Wattrel, Thundershock, flip a coin. Of heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Zapdos, same thing. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Zeraora, Shocking Knuckle. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Espeon has Cyble. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is now paralyzed. Flittle, Cyble. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Mr. Mime, Cyble. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Sigilyph, Cyble. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Sinistea, Colty. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Glimmora has Stun Poison for 1 colorless energy. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed and poisoned. And then Venoshock follows it up. If your opponent's active is poisoned, it does 100 more damage, 30 plus 100. Pancham has Leer. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. The Dunsparce, interesting attack for 4 colorless energy. Dig Away Flash will do 100 base damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now paralyzed. Shuffle this Pokemon and all attached cards into your deck. This is where you want to play it with Dusknoir, attach a reversal energy and another energy of your choosing, and then wait until you really need it while while you set up the rest of your board. Then paralyze your opponent's active, and then do whatever else you got to do. Draftrig, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is now paralyzed. This is an option to play with Farigiraf EX if you're playing Wall Stall, or if you're playing a variant of Farigiraf EX with Blaziken EX. There's Grafaiai EX, Numbing Saliva. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. Licky, Body Slam. Flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is not paralyzed. Interesting other attack, Tongue Nado. Loudred, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is paralyzed. This is the mandatory stage 1 you need in order to use Exploud, which will automatically discard your opponent's active. And then we are back to the beginning. And last but certainly not least, we are going to go over all of the poison cards. We have Exeggutor, which we already went over, Amoonguss, which we already went over, Beedrill, which we already went over, Cradily is here again, which we already went over. Roselia has Poison Point. This Pokemon's in the active and is damaged by an attack from your opponent's Pokemon. The attacking Pokemon is now poisoned. Roserade has the exact same thing. It also has Bind Down, which is a retreat lock attack. Then we have Venusaur. With Dangerous Toxic, your opponent's active is now confused and poisoned. We went over this one. Tentacruel, which we went over. Pragunk, Poison Sting, poisons. Toxicroak, Knuckle Claws, poisons. Toxicroak EX, Toxic Ripper, 120 base damage, 1 darkness, 2 colorless energy. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. During Pokemon checkup, with 6 damage counters on that Pokemon instead of 1. You put in the Poison Jungle Stadium, it'll increase that up to 9. Nasty Plot is also nice to have. Search deck for 2 cards, put them into your hand and shuffle your deck. This card will work great with Janine's Secret Technique for a quick, or as quick as possible, energy acceleration. Also Crispin. Gligar, Toxic, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent's active is poisoned. During checkup, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon instead of 1. Gliscor has Toxic Sting, which does the exact same thing. Limit, Poison Charge, your opponent's active is now poisoned. Glimmora, Poison Petals, your opponent's active is now poisoned. During Pokemon checkup, you put 6 damage counters on that Pokemon instead of 1. Also, the ability Shattering Crystal. When this Pokemon is KO'd, flip a coin. If heads, your opponent can't take any prizes for it. You could also put a Legacy Energy on it to guarantee it, but that's a bit much. The other Glimmora, as we know, we went over this, Stun Poison, poisons. Another Glimmora, Corrosive Shards, 20 base damage, 1 colorless energy. Your opponent's active is now poisoned. During your opponent's next turn, energy cards cannot be attached from your opponent's hand to that Pokemon. So imagine you can have a Dragapult EX in the active. Somehow you maybe have a Crushing Hammer, and then you make it so that Glimmora uses Corrosive Shards and your opponent cannot charge up the Dragapult. Just one example. And you have Glimmora EX. Wow, does Glimmora like to poison? Poisonous Gem for 2 fighting energy does 140 base damage. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned, and Dustfield reduces your opponent's bench down to 3. You could try using this in a control deck for bench control, but the problem I'm finding, ladies and gentlemen, is that it's really, really pesky to get out of the active with 3, and Turo doesn't always show up. So it's maybe worth some experimenting with Pidgeot control, but I find it's pretty hard to use. It's better maybe just to use it as a regular archetype with the 2 fighting energy. Brute Bonnet, we all know this. Toxic Powder ability. Once during your turn, if this Pokemon has an Ancient Booster Energy Capsule attached, you may make both active Pokemon poisoned. This is great for all sorts of combos, from hit and run into fetch run to using Binding Mochi with your active to increase your damage output. We have another Brute Bonnet with Poison Spray. Your opponent's active is now poisoned. Also Relentless Punches for 3 Darkness Energy, 50 plus 50 more damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active. So you could poison with the other Brute Bonnet, charge this one up, and then come in and start punching. Crobat has Poison Fang. Your opponent's active is poison. During Pokemon checkup, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon instead of 1. Ekans, Poison Blend poisons. Arbok, Panic Poison poisons. Grimer, Super Poison Breath poisons. Muck has Poison Sacs. Your opponent's poison Pokemon do not recover from that special condition when they evolve or de-evolve. Toxic Strike does 100 base damage. It poisons, and it's also 3 colorless and 1 darkness energy. Real bench liability also with the 4 retreat lock, but if you can get it charged up and attach a heavy baton, you might be able to salvage it. Gulpin, Super Poison Breath poisons. Swalot, Venomous Hit. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. Haunter, Super Poison Breath poisons. Nidoking, Venomous Impact. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. Also, the ability Enthusiastic King. This Pokemon attacks for free if Nidoqueen or Nidoqueen, if you prefer, is in the active. Nidoran or Nidoran, Poison Horn poisons. Okidogi EX will poison itself with Poisonous Musculature in order to attach 2 energy to itself. Paldean Wooper, Spit Poison. Your opponent's active Pokemon is now poisoned. Paldean Wooper with the Galaxy Foil, Splattering Poison poisons. Paldean Clodsire EX, Toxic Wasteland. Once during your turn of a statement in play, you may make your opponent's active Pokemon poisoned. It's another way to poison if you don't like the Brute Bonnet Ancient Booster Energy Capsule option. Baby Paldean Clodsire, Poison Ring poisons, and also retreat locks. Another baby Paldean Clodsire, Splattering Poison poisons. There is the infamous Baby Pecha Runt promo. The ability Toxic Subjugation. As long as this Pokemon is in the active, put 5 more damage counters on your opponent's poison Pokemon during Pokemon checkup. If for any reason Brute Bonnet and Ancient Booster Energy Capsule are not working, you have Poison Chain for 10 base damage, 1 colorless, 1 darkness energy. Your opponent's active Pokemon is poisoned, and it cannot retreat, so you're going to make your opponent's life miserable. Then we have Pecha Runt EX. Once during your turn, you can switch in one of your benched Darkness Pokemon, except any Pecha Runt EX, with your active Pokemon. If you do, the new active Pokemon is poisoned. You can't use this on itself, obviously, and you also can't use more than 1 per turn. This is popular in pretty much any Darkness deck you can think of, especially Hydreigon EX and the new Zoroark. Seviper, Spit Poison poisons. Strudel, Spit Poison poisons. Strudel, Toxic Teeth poisons. Grafaiai, Spit Poison poisons. Also, Colorful Graffiti, 1 darkness energy. You may discard as many basic energy cards as you like from your hand. This attack does 40 damage for each type of basic energy you discarded in this way. Highly recommend using Superior Energy Retrieval with this one. Grafaiai EX, Toxic Throw. Your opponent's active is poisoned, and you can't use this attack next turn. Trubbish, Venomous Hit poisons. Garbodor, Venomous Hit poisons, but it's really there for Chuck. Discard any number of Pokemon tools from your hand. It does 50 damage for each card you discarded in this way. Venipede, Spit Poison poisons. Whirlipede, Poison Ring poisons, and it's also a retreat lock. Varoom, Poison Gas poisons. There's Perilous Jungle, the famous stadium we've been talking about. During Pokemon checkup, put 2 more damage. Sorry, it's not 3, it's 2. Put 2 more damage counters on each poisoned non-darkness Pokemon. Atticus doesn't see much play for all the poison in the format. Use this card only if your opponent's active Pokemon is poisoned. Shuffle your hand to your deck, then draw 7. Genie's Secret Art, which we talked about. Choose up 2 of your Darkness Pokemon. For each of them, attach a basic Darkness energy, and then if that Pokemon is in the active, it is poisoned. So Binding Mochi would also go well here. There it is, Binding Mochi. Attacks used by the poison Pokemon this card is attached to do 40 more damage to your opponent's active. And then we are back to the beginning. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. Please let me know what I missed, and may God hold you in the palm of his hand.